Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that your favorite drink had suddenly disappeared. No coffee, no tea, no way to make another cup. Now imagine an entire empire facing that exact fear. In the early 19th century, Britain was the most powerful nation on Earth. Its ships ruled the oceans, its factories powered the Industrial Revolution, and its colonies stretched across the globe. Yet behind this image of strength was a dangerous weakness: tea. Every morning, millions of British families began their day with a cup of tea. It wasn't simply a drink anymore. It had become part of daily life, a national habit shared by the rich and the poor alike. But there was one problem. Britain couldn't grow tea. Every leaf came from China. For centuries, China had carefully protected the secrets of tea cultivation. Foreign merchants could buy finished tea, but they were never allowed to enter the remote mountain plantations where tea was grown. They couldn't learn how the leaves were harvested, processed, or transformed into the drink that Britain loved so much. As British demand exploded, ship after ship sailed to China, carrying silver in exchange for tea. Every year, enormous amounts of wealth left Britain and flowed into the Chinese Empire. Government officials and powerful businessmen feared that this dependence could eventually threaten Britain's economy and its global influence. Diplomacy failed. Trade negotiations failed. China had no reason to share its greatest agricultural secret. Then Britain made a decision that would change history forever. If China refused to sell the secret, Britain would steal it. The mission required a man brave enough to disguise himself, travel deep into forbidden regions of China, secretly collect living tea plants and thousands of precious seeds, learn every hidden step of tea production, and smuggle everything out of the country without being caught. If he failed, he could lose his freedom, or even his life. But if he succeeded, he would transform global trade forever. This is the true story of one of history's greatest acts of industrial espionage. This is the story of how Britain stole tea. Long before Britain decided to steal the secret of tea, the country had already become hopelessly addicted to it. Tea first arrived in England during the mid-17th century as an exotic luxury imported from China. At first, only kings, queens, wealthy merchants, and aristocrats could afford it. A single pound of tea cost so much that it was often locked inside ornate wooden chests to prevent theft. But as the years passed, something remarkable happened. Tea was no longer a symbol of wealth. It became a daily ritual. From elegant drawing rooms in London to crowded factories in Manchester, people from every social class began drinking tea. Families gathered around the teapot each morning. Factory workers relied on tea during long shifts. Sailors drank it aboard ships crossing dangerous oceans. Even children were often given weak tea mixed with milk. The drink offered more than comfort. Unlike much of the water available in growing cities, boiled tea was usually safer to drink. As Britain's population exploded during the Industrial Revolution, clean drinking water became increasingly difficult to find. Tea unintentionally became one of the safest beverages in everyday life. Demand skyrocketed. By the early 19th century, Britain was importing tens of millions of pounds of tea every year from China. The East India Company controlled much of this trade, and ships constantly sailed between Asia and Britain carrying enormous cargoes of tea. But there was a price. China demanded payment almost entirely in silver. Every shipment of tea meant another fortune leaving Britain. Government officials became increasingly alarmed. Economists warned that Britain was sending away vast amounts of its wealth while receiving little in return except dried leaves. This wasn't just a trade problem anymore. It was becoming a national security concern. Britain needed a way to break China's monopoly. The empire didn't simply want to buy tea, it wanted to grow it. And to do that, Britain would need something China had protected for centuries: the secret behind every single leaf. To understand why Britain was willing to risk everything for tea, you first have to understand China. For thousands of years, tea was far more than a simple beverage. It was woven into Chinese culture, medicine, philosophy, and daily life. Long before Europe had ever tasted its first cup, Chinese farmers had already perfected the art of cultivating tea in the misty mountains of Fujian, Anhui, Zhejiang, and Yunnan. Growing tea wasn't easy. The finest leaves could only be harvested during specific seasons, often by skilled workers who carefully picked only the youngest buds by hand. Timing, weather, altitude, and even the direction of the mountain slopes could influence the flavor of the final product. But harvesting was only the beginning. The leaves had to be withered, rolled, oxidized, heated, dried, and sorted using techniques that had been refined over centuries. Every village had its own methods, and many families treated these techniques as priceless secrets passed from one generation to the next. The Qing government had no intention of sharing this knowledge with foreign powers. Foreign merchants were tightly controlled under the Canton system. They could only trade through approved Chinese merchants at the port of Canton, now known as Guangzhou. They were forbidden from traveling freely into China's interior, where the tea plantations were located. The message was clear: buy the tea if you wish, but never ask how it's made. To Britain, this was more than frustrating. It was dangerous. Without the knowledge to grow tea themselves, the empire would remain completely dependent on China forever. Every cup poured in London strengthened China's position in global trade, while Britain's silver reserves continued to shrink. British officials realized something extraordinary. The secret wasn't the tea itself. The real treasure was the knowledge behind it, and knowledge could be stolen. Soon, the British government and the East India Company would begin searching for the perfect man to carry out an almost impossible mission. A man who could disappear into China and return with the secret that had been protected for centuries. By the 1840s, Britain had reached a turning point. The empire could no longer afford to depend entirely on China for tea. Every year, millions of pounds of tea crossed the oceans, while mountains of British silver disappeared into Chinese markets. Officials in London knew that buying tea was no longer enough. They needed to grow it themselves. But there was one enormous obstacle. No one outside China truly understood how tea was cultivated or processed. The knowledge remained locked behind mountains, guarded villages, and strict government restrictions. Britain needed someone extraordinary. Not a soldier, not a diplomat, not even a merchant. They needed a botanist. His name was Robert Fortune. Born in Scotland in 1812, Fortune had earned a reputation as one of Britain's most talented plant hunters. He had traveled through Asia, collecting rare flowers and exotic plants for British gardens. He was patient, intelligent, observant, and willing to travel where few Europeans dared to go. Those qualities made him the perfect choice. The East India Company secretly approached Fortune with a mission unlike anything he had ever attempted. Travel deep into China's forbidden tea-growing regions, discover every step of tea cultivation, collect living tea plants and thousands of seeds, recruit experienced Chinese tea workers if possible, and bring everything safely to British-controlled India. The mission sounded almost impossible. Foreigners were viewed with deep suspicion, especially after growing tensions between Britain and China. Many areas where the finest tea was grown were completely closed to outsiders. If Fortune was recognized as a foreigner, his journey would end immediately. So he made a remarkable decision. He would disappear. He cut his hair into the traditional Qing style, wore Chinese clothing, learned local customs, and traveled under disguises that allowed him to blend into villages where Europeans had never been welcome. Every step forward increased the risk. One mistake, one suspicious glance, one careless word, and the greatest industrial espionage mission in history could end before it had truly begun. Disguised as a Chinese traveler, Robert Fortune quietly entered regions where almost no European had ever been allowed to go. This was not simply a journey across mountains. It was a journey into one of the world's most closely guarded industries. Traveling through the winding roads of Fujian and Zhejiang provinces, Fortune carefully observed everything around him. Every village had its own tea gardens. Every hillside was covered with rows of carefully cultivated tea bushes, and every family seemed to know techniques that outsiders had never seen before. He carried notebooks instead of weapons. Every day, he secretly recorded what he learned. He measured the distance between tea plants. He studied the soil. He noted the elevation of the mountains, the changing temperatures, and the exact seasons when the finest leaves were harvested. But the greatest discoveries came inside the tea workshops. Fortune watched experienced workers spread fresh leaves across bamboo trays to wither naturally. He observed them rolling the leaves by hand, exposing them to controlled oxidation, then heating and drying them over charcoal fires. For the first time, a foreigner was witnessing the complete process of making high-quality Chinese tea. The mystery that Europe had wondered about for centuries was slowly being uncovered. Yet every new discovery made the mission more dangerous. Rumors spread quickly through isolated mountain villages. People began asking questions. Who was this traveler? Why did he ask so many questions about tea? Why did he spend so much time writing notes instead of buying goods? One careless conversation could expose everything. If local officials discovered that he was British, his notebooks would be seized, his mission would end immediately, and he might never leave China alive. But Robert Fortune had not traveled thousands of miles to return empty-handed. He was preparing for the most dangerous part of his mission. Learning the secret was only half the job. Now he had to steal living tea plants, thousands of valuable seeds, and somehow transport them safely across the sea without anyone realizing what had been taken. By now, Robert Fortune had uncovered the secret of how China produced the world's finest tea. But knowledge alone wasn't enough. Britain didn't just need instructions, it needed living tea plants. Without healthy plants, fertile seeds, and experienced growers, there would be no tea plantations in India. Everything depended on what Fortune could secretly take out of China. The mission entered its most dangerous stage. As he traveled through remote tea-growing villages, Fortune quietly purchased young tea plants from local farmers. Whenever possible, he collected fresh seeds from the healthiest bushes, carefully selecting only the strongest varieties. Every plant had to survive a journey of thousands of miles. To solve this problem, Fortune used one of the most remarkable inventions of the 19th century, the Wardian case. Invented only a few years earlier, the Wardian case was a sealed glass container that acted like a miniature greenhouse. Moisture recycled naturally inside the case, allowing delicate plants to survive long sea voyages that would normally kill them. It was revolutionary. Fortune carefully packed hundreds of living tea plants inside these protective glass cases. Thousands of seeds were dried, sorted, and hidden among ordinary cargo. But plants alone were not enough. Tea required skilled hands. Without experienced workers, Britain could never reproduce China's methods. So Fortune quietly persuaded several Chinese tea experts to leave their homeland and travel to India. Their knowledge was every bit as valuable as the plants themselves. Everything had to remain secret. Every shipment attracted attention. Every inspection increased the risk. If Qing officials opened the cases and discovered what they contained, years of planning would collapse in a single moment. As the ships finally prepared to leave China's coast, Fortune stood watching from the harbor. Inside those wooden crates was more than tea. Hidden within them was the future of an empire. If they reached India safely, the global tea trade would never be the same again. When Robert Fortune's precious cargo finally arrived in British-controlled India, the mission was far from over. The tea plants had survived the long voyage across the sea, protected inside their glass Wardian cases. But surviving the journey was only the first victory. Now they had to survive an entirely different climate. British officials selected the Himalayan foothills and the lush valleys of Darjeeling as one of the first places to experiment with Chinese tea plants. The region's cool temperatures, mountain air, and seasonal rainfall closely resembled parts of China's famous tea-growing provinces. It was a gamble. If the plants failed to adapt, years of planning and enormous amounts of money would be lost. Botanists carefully removed each tea plant from its glass case and replanted it in carefully prepared soil. Every leaf was monitored. Every branch was protected. Every sign of new growth brought hope. At the same time, the experienced Chinese tea makers who had traveled with Fortune began teaching local workers the techniques they had practiced for generations. They demonstrated how to recognize the perfect leaves for harvest, how to wither them, how to roll them, how to control oxidation, how to dry them without destroying their flavor. For the first time in history, China's closely guarded knowledge was being practiced outside its borders. Months passed. Then came the breakthrough Britain had been waiting for. The young tea bushes began producing healthy new leaves. The first harvest was small, but it proved something extraordinary. Tea could grow successfully in India. The East India Company immediately recognized the opportunity. If enough plantations could be created, Britain would no longer depend entirely on China. The secret that had crossed the mountains hidden inside notebooks, glass cases, and wooden crates was beginning to reshape the global economy. What had started as a dangerous espionage mission was becoming one of the most successful agricultural projects in British history. And China had no idea that its centuries-old monopoly was about to collapse. The success of Britain's tea plantations in India marked the beginning of a new era. For centuries, China had been the world's undisputed source of tea. Every nation that wanted the precious leaves had little choice but to buy them from Chinese merchants. That monopoly had made tea one of China's greatest economic strengths. But now, everything was changing. As more plantations spread across Darjeeling and Assam, Britain's harvests grew larger every year. What had begun as a risky experiment soon became a massive industry backed by the resources of the British Empire. New roads were built through dense forests. Railways connected remote plantations to major ports. Thousands of workers were recruited to plant, harvest, and process tea on an industrial scale. Soon, ships that once returned from China loaded with tea were leaving the ports of India instead. For Britain, the benefits were enormous. Tea was now produced within its own empire, reducing its dependence on Chinese exports. The flow of silver to China slowed dramatically, while British merchants gained greater control over one of the world's most profitable trades. The impact on China was equally significant. Although China remained an important producer, it was no longer the only source of high-quality tea. International buyers now had another option, and competition began to reshape the global market. Within a few decades, Indian tea was appearing in homes across Britain, Europe, and eventually North America. Most people pouring a cup of tea had no idea that the drink in their hands was connected to one of history's boldest espionage missions. Behind every sip was a story of stolen knowledge, hidden identities, dangerous journeys, and an empire determined to rewrite the rules of global trade. Robert Fortune had accomplished exactly what Britain had hoped for. He hadn't stolen treasure made of gold. He had stolen something far more valuable: knowledge. And knowledge had changed the world forever. By the late 19th century, Britain's mission had achieved something few people thought was possible. India had become one of the world's largest tea producers. The green hills of Darjeeling and the vast plantations of Assam were producing millions of pounds of tea every year. British ships carried those leaves across the globe, supplying homes, cafes, hotels, and markets from London to New York. Tea was no longer China's exclusive gift to the world. It had become a global industry. The British Empire had broken a monopoly that had lasted for centuries. For Britain, it was an economic triumph. For China, it marked the beginning of a new reality. Although China continued producing exceptional tea, it no longer controlled the world's supply. International competition had arrived, and the balance of power had shifted forever. At the center of this transformation stood one man, Robert Fortune. Some historians describe him as a brilliant botanist who expanded agricultural knowledge and helped create one of the world's largest tea industries. Others see him very differently. They argue that he committed one of history's greatest acts of industrial espionage by secretly taking China's plants, knowledge, and skilled workers without permission. Even today, the debate continues. Was he an explorer, or was he a spy? The answer depends on whose side of history you choose to stand. What cannot be denied is the scale of his achievement. One man's journey through the mountains of China reshaped global trade, changed the future of British India, and transformed the daily habits of millions of people around the world. Every cup of tea carries a story, not just of comfort and tradition, but of secrecy, ambition, empire, and extraordinary risk. A story hidden inside every leaf. Today, tea is the second most consumed beverage on Earth after water. Every single day, billions of cups are poured across homes, offices, cafes, and restaurants around the world. For most people, it's simply part of their daily routine, a comforting drink shared with family, friends, or enjoyed alone in a quiet moment. Few ever stop to ask how it became so common. Behind every cup lies a story that stretches across continents and centuries, a story of powerful empires, secret mountain plantations, dangerous journeys, industrial espionage, and one man willing to risk everything for a handful of plants and a closely guarded secret. Robert Fortune's mission didn't just change Britain's future. It transformed the global tea industry forever. Within a few decades, India and Ceylon, now known as Sri Lanka, had become two of the world's leading tea producers. The British Empire no longer depended entirely on Chinese tea, and a trade that had once flowed in only one direction had become truly global. But history often raises difficult questions. Was Britain's mission an extraordinary scientific achievement? Or was it an act of theft that changed another nation's future without its consent? Even today, historians continue to debate that question. What remains undeniable is that knowledge has always been one of the world's most valuable resources. Sometimes, it is worth more than gold, more powerful than armies, and capable of changing the course of history. The next time you hold a warm cup of tea, remember that it is far more than a simple drink. It is the result of centuries of tradition, fierce competition, remarkable innovation, and one of the boldest secret missions ever carried out. A mission that quietly reshaped global trade, changed the fate of empires, and forever altered the way the world drinks tea. Sometimes, history isn't written with swords. Sometimes, it's written with a single leaf.